That Sober Guy podcast contains adult content, merciless truth, and emotional nudity. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Sober Guy Radio. Thanks to Humans for bringing us in, and thanks to you for supporting the show. Today's guest is Joseph Naus, and Joseph was born in 1971 and graduated from Pepperdine Law, and he passed the bar exam in 1997. Joseph was raised by his mom, who was a heroin addict turned shut-in depressive amongst crime and poverty. At age 32, Joseph's American dream life became a nightmare when his addictions to sex and alcohol collided and exploded. And this comes from the back of his book, Straight Pepper Diet, kind of a little intro or a little piece of what Joseph's story entails. It says, on Tuesday, I was a respected civil trial lawyer making six figures. On Wednesday, I woke up handcuffed to a hospital bed being charged with attempted murder. And then it got worse. So how does it get worse? Well, we talk in detail about that in this episode. We also got into some lighter topics that includes punk rock. Joseph and I both have a love for punk rock, so we talked a little bit about that. And we also talked about Joseph's background in martial arts, which has to do, it's actually a significant part of his story. And we talked about movies like Kickboxer and Bloodsport. And I think we even mentioned Dennis Alexio, who comes from my hometown of Vacaville. We're going to get to Joseph in just a minute. First, a word from our sponsor.
At Foundations Recovery Network, our mission is to create lifetime relationships for long-term recovery. In our history of doing good is the promise of your future getting better. So if you or someone you love needs help, please know we are here to help. And the sign on our door says, "We care." We create an individualized treatment plan for the whole person, for the whole you, because to us, you matter. The first step to recovery is heroic. We know that. And with our Heroes in Recovery movement, we honor those who have taken that step toward recovery and stand up for you and stand beside you and stand together to break the stigma placed on addiction. Call our confidential and private line at 877-714-1318. We are here to help you. And help has a phone number, 877-714-1318. Make the call. We're listening. We're Foundations Recovery Network.
Thanks to Foundations for supporting the show. Go to thatsoberguy.com. Check out all the free stuff there. You can sign up for the emails of the show, any updates, anything like that. You can also sign up and download the 6 quick tips to quit drinking in 24 hours. It's not a magic guide that's going to save your ass by any means. But what it did for me is, these kind of steps, these quick tips helped get me started and get me on the right track. And hopefully it can do the same for you. Check those out there. That's soberguy.com. You can also jump into the private Facebook group, Sober Guy, Sober Girl. And go check out Patreon. Patreon is really a direct way for you to support us at Sober Guy Radio. Go to patreon.com/Sober Guy Radio. And when you do that and when you make a pledge, you only got to pledge $5 a month. It helps support the operation. You'll also get access to Jess and I's new show, Real. And you'll get content on Real, like codependency. In one episode, we talk about codependency. And I'll just read this. In episode 2 of The Real Show, Shane and the Jess discuss abusing jelly donuts and codependency. Cash also makes a guest appearance at the very end to inform everyone that he pooped his pants. So enjoy. These are the types of things, man. These are just real life shit that we go through in relationships and dealing with struggles in recovery and dealing with a spouse or a loved one. We kind of talk about that. We air out some of that shit. And I don't want to talk about how I've been abusing jelly donuts, but hey, it's life, it's real, and that's why it's called The Real Show. So check that out on Welcome to Sober Guy Radio. Thanks for tuning in today. I have Joseph Naus joining the show. Joseph, what's up, man? How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Let's dive right in here, man. I know you had a rough childhood. Take us back to kind of how you got through that, Joseph.
Well, I was, I'm from Southern Cal. Well, let's see, where do I start here? I'm 45 years old now. I was born in Southern California in Riverside, kind of a rough area. And my mom had me when she was 17. I think she was pregnant when she was 16, had me when she was 17. My dad left when I was, I think, 6 weeks old. And so we were on welfare, and my mom got into heroin and was a heroin addict. And so I was it was just me and my mom. And it was rough, and she got busted with me in the car scoring dope, and almost had me taken away and put into foster care, but that didn't happen. And so I stayed around, and I have memories of going to the methadone clinic with her when I was a kid. And, after the strange thing about that was that after my mom kicked heroin successfully, she really just became a depressive kind of shut-in, and that was actually kind of worse, because she didn't do anything. So my childhood was rough and very lonely, and I always say that there was two different ways you could go, and one was to be a tough guy, and the other was to just kind of like disappear, and I disappeared, and
How did you? So if mom is obviously an addict, she's probably encased in her own world, in her own bubble, in a sense. How do you survive as a kid? How do you eat? I mean, just the basics,
Well, I had 3 techniques for eating, and when things got really rough, especially during the summers when I wasn't at school and couldn't get food that way. Yeah. One, I would go to, there was a boys club up the street, and during the summers, and even during the regular time, they would, non-summers, they would give snacks away and sometimes lunches. And the second way I did it was by stealing from a grocery store that was up the street, like a little small market. And the third way was the way that probably was the most important, was I would always have like friends that were from a neighborhood that was about a couple miles away, that was a nicer neighborhood, and I would befriend these kids and I would spend the night. So sometimes I'd spend the night at one kid's house 2 nights and then go to another kid's, and I'd be gone for a week, at a time. And then on the first, I think it was the first of the month, I don't know if anyways, we would get our welfare checks, and then for a couple days things would be cool, and then I would go back. So that was kind of that way I did it when I was probably from, I don't know, 2nd grade through 8th or 9th, until I actually got a job when I was in high school.
Damn, dude, 2nd grade, man. Like my daughter's in 1st grade, and so that kind of puts that in perspective. When you think about that, how do you, how has that affected you as an adult? Like, I know in part of recovery is obviously going back and dealing with those issues from when we were a kid, but how have you kind of been able to deal with that and overcome it?
Well, I used to have this story for myself, and that was, that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger, that whole thing.
Yeah, sure.
And then I kind of matured into this of this kind of understanding that, that's not really true. I mean, it's true in some regards, but it's not true in others. It's certainly true in a physical sense of like, I know how to survive, but emotionally it's not necessarily true. Which isn't that the nature of alcoholism or spirituality, is that everything is true at some points and not true at others, and true in some ways and not true in others. It's kind of like that. So I also had this other story that I told myself, which is that my mom was the victim of my father, and my father was to blame for everything. Wow. And I also had to learn that wasn't exactly correct either, that she was one of us that didn't get the gift that we got. And so, I was able to forgive her. And I also understood that, she wasn't just a victim. She made her own choices. And, I always say, once I know that I'm an addict, my responsibility is to get help. Yeah. That's the thing I could do wrong. if I truly believe that addiction is a disease, which I do, then how can I say that someone who has a disease is culpable for anything other than getting help, you know?
Yeah.
So that's the way I looked at it.
Yeah, that's always a tough one, man. And I know I even struggle with that still, man. Is like your loved one that you want to help, but at the same time, putting like the feelings of the love and like, or the tough love, or the make excuses love, whatever it is. Like ultimately, we're all the same in that aspect of like, I'm sick in a sense, you know what I mean? Like if without the right therapy or a program or some help out there, I'm really fighting an uphill battle against myself. Now I know that as a kid too, one of the things I thought was interesting about you, and it actually plays a little bit into the later story, which of course we're going to get into, but was about your ability to defend yourself. Talk about how that was something that kind of helped you evolve and grow as a boy into a man.
Well, like I said, I was pretty wimpy when I was really young, and I was just always, bowing away. And I was a big kid. I'm tall. I'm like 6'4", and so even during kid, I was usually the tallest kid in class. I didn't really get picked on too much, but when I did, I'd always just cowered away.
Yeah.
And then I kind of got sick of that, just kind of snapped. And when I was in high school, and I just kind of went crazy one time after I got bullied by someone, that was just the event that happened. It was a long series of this type of thing, and it was just like getting beat up by life,
Yeah, sure.
And I just kind of decided at that point, this is way before I started using any drugs or alcohol, that I wasn't going to do that anymore. And I left school that day and didn't go to work, and I went and signed up at a gym / kung fu studio. and it was just really a change in attitude more than anything else. And I just really went at it. I was just like, my attitude was, I'd rather die than be a coward again. And I went after it like crazy. I started lifting all the time. I got kind of muscled up a little bit, and I got into martial arts. And I first started kung fu, which after a while I just kind of realized was more of a dance than a fighting art. Yeah. So I started kickboxing, and I hooked up with this guy David Morrow, who was a crazy kickboxer. This was before MMA was a thing. We used to call it MMA shoot fighting. Yeah. And it was we did kickboxing, which was knees and elbows and stuff. And this guy was just crazy. He's passed away since then. He was. Tell me
you were watching Bloodsport around that time.
Oh yeah. That Bloodsport. David actually was, he would do extra stuff in those. And sometimes I'd take care of the gym while he went and shot that in Bloodsport. I think that was the one with Paulo in it, who was a guy that I kickboxed with.
Really?
So yeah, I knew those guys, some of the guys that were in that, because it was a pretty small community of kickboxers.
Yeah. Well, and those movies, man, those movies were big, like Lionheart, I think, was another one. And then was Bloodsport the one with Dennis Alexio? Dennis Alexio was in one of them.
No, I think Bloodsport was Van Damme.
Well, Van Damme.
That famous Asian guy with the big giant chest.
Yeah.
Bruce Lee movies.
Yeah, Chong Li was his
Chong Li, that's
movie.
right.
Yeah,
Chong Li. And he was in some Bruce Lee movies. That guy was amazing.
Maybe it was
Kickboxer.
Kickboxer
was the one.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Dennis Alexio. He was a professional kickboxer.
Yeah, the only reason I mentioned that too is because his family is from Vacaville here, and so that was always the thing growing up. Like, oh yeah, Dennis Alexio. He was a badass back in the day.
Oh yeah, there was another guy that was in there. You ever heard Benny the Jet Urquidez?
Doesn't ring a bell.
He's like probably the best kickboxer that ever lived. He had a gym down here, and he's been in a lot of movies and stuff. And anyways, yeah, I was really into that stuff, and it was it just kind of taught me that physical pain was much less painful than emotional pain. Just getting beat up was no big deal, and once you learn that, fighting is no big deal. Yeah. And you also kind of learn, I think it was Tad in one of your earlier podcasts said something that really struck me, was like, tattoos don't make you tough.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of learned that in jail. Like I spent 7 years of my life pretty dedicated to learning how to fight.
Yeah.
And then I would get in these fights with these guys that, you know, in jail and stuff, I'd see these guys fight that were like supposedly tough guys, and you'd see how bad they were at fighting. And it didn't really matter how scowled they look or, you know, how tough they looked on their face. They had no skills. And so it's kind of like, you know, you could play tennis all your life, and if you're going to go against some guy who's a really good natural athlete, you're still going to beat him because you're a tennis player, you know?
Yeah.
He might, if you both practice the same amount of time, he might beat you, but, you know, that's kind of... So yeah, anyways, kickboxing was a big thing in my life. It really taught me a lot of lessons.
It's crazy too. I mean, yeah, because when you put it in that perspective, you know, fighting really is an art, just like any of the, you know, whether it's kickboxing or kempo or jiu-jitsu. I don't know a whole lot about them. I'd probably get my ass kicked, but it's something there. I think like even for me, I would choose to look at it from the physical, you know, aspect of it, but when you really break it down, the mental part of it and the emotional part of it is a lot stronger, I think, than people realize. And I think I remember you saying, and you know, you didn't understand if maybe it was just the, you know, the how the universe works, I guess, or I can't remember the exact terms you put it in. But once you started training and you became more confident, nobody really fucked with you after that. And not that a bunch of people fucked with you anyways, but you just kind of send that vibe off. You know what I'm saying?
That is exactly. It's kind of interesting you bring that up, because that's kind of the concept that I'm wrestling with in my next book. And that's kind of like this concept, you know, you're in the Bible and in a lot of different spiritual principles, and that is, it is done to you as you believe it to be true. And that is exactly the natural law that was in effect at that time that I didn't have words for, I didn't know, but it wasn't exactly that happened. I mean, I literally went from, you know, I just never again had any incident. No one fucked with me because I didn't have that vibe. Yeah. You know, it was weird. It was, you know, I didn't know what it was. Now I know exactly what it is, but at the time I didn't know, you know, it's really, yeah, exactly. That's so true.
Well, so I want to give just a little intro into some of the book and to some of the story later on, and I don't want to get into it just yet, but just so the listeners can kind of get an idea. This is kind of just an intro of some of your story. On Tuesday, I was a respected civil trial lawyer making six figures. On Wednesday, I woke up handcuffed to a hospital bed, charged with attempted murder, and then it got worse. So we're going to get into that in just a little bit, and that'll kind of take its course as we continue the conversation. But one of the things that you and I have in common that I thought was so cool too was old punk rock. You were a straight edge kid growing up, man. Minor Threat, Bad Religion. I mean, that whole movement. Tell us about that part of your life, and then how did you go from that into starting to drink and use drugs, which ultimately, you know, led down the path of ending up in prison?
Well, when I was in high school, my best friend was a musician. I hung around with a lot of musicians, and I wasn't one, and they kind of like steered me towards music, and they were really into heavy metal. So I was into heavy metal, like when I was in 8th grade and stuff. Yeah. And then, he turned me on to Minor Threat. That was the very first quote unquote straight edge band I'd ever heard, and it blew our mind. It was different than anything we'd ever heard. And then from there, we just became fans, and we went to all the other stuff that was nothing really got any better than Minor Threat. I don't know if you agree, but it was like, you know, then you had all these Revelation Records bands like Youth of Today with Ray Capone and Gorilla Biscuits from out here in California.
I remember.
Like I actually have a buddy, Excel. They weren't straight edge, but Excel and Suicidal Tendencies and No Mercy.
I gotta grab my skateboard every time I hear some Suicidal Tendencies.
Yeah,
I probably break my neck now, but
so and they, you know, I just did what those guys did. They were straight edge, and I was just like looking for something to believe in, you know. And so I was all about the. You know, you go to shows. Like I went to a few shows, and in California, they would come out here, and Revelation Records, for instance, they were from New York, and they would come out here and they would bring everybody. So you'd see 6 bands. It would cost $5. You'd get a T-shirt for $5.
Wow. And
you'd be literally practically on stage. And it was such an eye-awakening later on in my life when I went to some real, you know, concerts and saw some, you know, mainstream bands. I'm like, what the hell is this? I'm like, $100 and I'm 100 yards from the stage. Like, what, and the t-shirts are $50.
Did you feel like you could get out a lot of aggression and shit back in those old shows? Like, I know for me, man, that was a time in my life when I could go and I could just be me and just let go and just fucking hardcore dance and mosh and just have like genuine fun. And at the same time, I felt like I could get aggression out and some of the feelings that were bottled up from, whatever the hell was going on at the time, a number of different things. What about for you, man? Like, did you have a connection there with that too?
I did. I especially with the straight edge shows that were strictly straight edge, it was all about positive. There was a lot of positivity, even though it was kind of, went a little far after a while with the no drugs, no sex, vegan, everything. It was kind of it was all about no. Yeah. But it was also this kind of positive thing about like kids that might normally get into drugs and stuff, which was punk rock before that was kind of like drop out and die kind of stuff. Yeah. And now you have the straight edge thing, so yeah, I totally had that. That you were just like, I don't know, it was a great atmosphere. Everyone was there for the same reason. When you would go in the mosh pits and stuff, people would pick each other up. That was like the protocol. Yeah. And so no matter how radical it got, the violence wasn't there. But then when you went to shows where there was mixed crowds, like I remember going to Fender's Ballroom in Long Beach, which is now closed. And we saw, we saw No Mercy, which is a very, very violent band. And there was like skinheads outside and suicidals and stuff, and that had a different vibe to it. But I think one of the first spiritual experiences I ever had was I saw Bad Brains and 7 Seconds together. Oh
man, that's rad!
It was amazing. Like Bad Brains is still like one of my favorite bands. Played Eye Against Eye, and they're just like intro to Eye Against Eye. And I'm at the country club in Reseda, which is like this venue. I don't even know if it's there anymore. And standing on this bar stool, like eye to eye with HR, the lead singer, and and then just losing it. Like it was the best ever. It was one of the best shows I've ever been to.
Yeah, man. No, just hearing you talk about it, man, it brings back so many memories, man. It's just a good time in my life, and it is encouraging. Like I have 2 young kids, man, and I hope to. I play guitar myself. I got my son playing drums now. He's 2. He's already got some damn drums, man. He's banging around on
nice.
It. Yeah, it's super cool. And I just like, it's good to know, I guess, that there's still like a straight edge movement and that it's continuously growing. I know there's different sectors and there's kind of different, some people believe different things. There's all different parts of it, but just the general mentality of no drugs and no alcohol, and trying to live a healthy, positive lifestyle is really encouraging, for me to see that, hopefully my kids can kind of go down that same path with all the bullshit that's going on in our society today. It's just thrown on our youth, and it's really sad.
Yeah. I would, like I said, it all started with Minor Threat, and it's kind of funny because if you followed Ian MacKaye, through his career and through his beliefs and everything and his musical journey, he's kind of still the guy, that guy's amazing. And he's just like even the way he runs his record label and everything is pretty amazing. That guy from the Cro-Mags too is kind of the same way. I forget that John Joseph, John Joseph, I think his name is, same way. A lot of those guys have evolved into, really spiritual beings and have done a lot of great things. It's great. I love music. I don't play music. I just don't have it in me, but like my fiance is a musician and she plays guitar a lot, and she used to play the drums in some cool bands. And it's
a big part.
It's cool stuff.
For sure, man. Definitely a big part of recovery too. I've had to kind of transition, I guess how I approach it. You know how those songs like bring back songs or smells. Those are 2 that really stand out to me. They'll bring me back to like a point in my life where I can almost remember the moment or whatever. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not so good. So I gotta always be careful about like what I'm putting into my brain,
Yeah. Well, I used to listen to 9 Inch Nails' Pretty Hate Machine when I was in law school and in like a dark, dark place. Yeah, and even though I think that's a great album, I had to be real careful about when I listen to that. And
sure.
Yeah.
So going from, growing up, straight edge, like take us to the point, law school. Did you have your first drink in law school, or was it after?
No. I graduated from high school, and then I went to college, and like a lot of the stuff is the underlying theme or the underlying mover of my life was fear. Really, when you grow up like I did, what you're afraid of is poverty. And then there was some point in college where I was really kicking ass, and I was still kickboxing, and I was straight edge, and I think I was vegetarian at the time. I had a 4.0 in my college. I was on the Model United Nations team, and we'd won, and I was elected to be the president of that, and I got an internship with one of the best lawyers in the country, and I got all these scholarships, and I had a really great girlfriend, and everything was just going well, and so I kind of let my guard down a bit, and like I said, I was in New York for the first time with the college team, the Model United Nations, and for the first time in my life, it wasn't the first time I ever had a drink, but it was the first significant time I ever had a drink. But I'd say one night I went out partying in New York. First time I was in New York. It was the first time I cheated on my girlfriend. It was the first time I smoked a cigarette, and it was the first time I drank to drunkenness, all in one night. And it was the greatest night of my life, or at least I thought. Yeah. And I got, that was the new, it didn't immediately change my life right then and there. It wasn't like I became a daily drinking alcoholic by any stretch, yeah. But it changed, it reset, there was a new default setting in my mind of what the best thing there was. Like the best thing there was now was getting drunk, smoking a cigarette. I just love that. Like it was like, wow, why hadn't I been doing this all along? The idea of straight edge or why I'd been doing that or didn't drink all that time didn't even cross my mind. That was the new, yeah. That's the best thing there is.
Wow, it's crazy, man. It's crazy how it's almost like a switch, I mean, you go from one extreme to the other extreme in one night and basically blow your load literally all at once, right? I mean,
you're just like, remember having that Jack and Coke? I remember I'm in this bar, everyone's smoking. You still smoke. I'm in New York. They're playing like Billy Joel, and I've got a Jack and Coke. And I remember thinking like, what the fuck? Like, why did anybody tell me about this? Because I drank beer before, and I was like, beer didn't really do it for me. The Jack and Coke, I was like, whoa. Yeah. This is amazing. It tastes good. It's like I'm feeling. It was. I'm sure a lot of your listeners are addicts and alcoholics and 12-steppers who can relate to that feeling of this. Like, this is the best thing ever.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and so, you had mentioned that you had cheated on your fiance at the time, and a big part of your story is being addicted to sex, and that's something that at least on this show we haven't really got into much, if at all. Now that I really think back about it, I think with addicts, there's all kinds of different addictions we can have, right? We can have booze, food, sex. There's all different kinds of it. In your case, you kind of hit like 3 at one time with alcohol, tobacco, and sex. So take us from that night. Like, where does the rest of the story go?
Well, it was a slow progression from that night. I mean, that night I was still an undergraduate, and I kept it together. I graduated. I got into a good law school, and but I was slowly, starting to have nights of drinking, and I would sneak cigarettes and stuff. And I really got into porn. That was when you still had like VHS porn. And I also got into prostitution and massage parlors. And that was just like really crazy, just like I describe in the book. There were just times I would just be like, I'd be driving down the street in the kind of near the neighborhood I grew up in, and there was this University Avenue, and you'd see these prostitutes, and they would just like bring this rush. It was very similar to how heroin addicts describe scoring dope and then using. You just, you got this rush. So I got into that, and I ended up, as time progressed, I ended up mostly doing massage parlors because the prostitutes was just too risky getting arrested, too risky of getting robbed, too risky of getting the disease. But massage parlors were kind of safe in some regard, although still.
I'm sure that you're able. Let me just ask you. I shouldn't assume. Are you able to find like sometimes with serious situations that are just, they're fucking crazy. Sometimes our lives, like things we go through. Are you able now to find like the comedy in some of this shit, like as you've grown and like gotten past it and stuff, or maybe comedy's the wrong word. But I guess what I'm getting at is, what does the negotiation of a prostitute like look like? I mean, that's something like, I've never experienced that. Like what does that look like? Like, how does that play out?
So the first time I can, when I was a little kid and I grew up in this riverside, where there was Market Street, and Market Street is where all these prostitutes would cruise around. And I remember when I was a kid seeing them and knowing something was up with them and getting a little tingle feeling,
Yeah.
And then I have this other memory of when my dad picked me up one summer. He had a fence company, and it was in Pomona. And we drove through this unincorporated area to get to his fence company, and there was those massage parlors. And one time I saw this massage parlor prostitute walk out the back door, and she had this little tiny skirt on, and she was like waving goodbye to somebody or something. And like that stuck in my head. And right when I turned 18, like out of the blue, I drove down to that massage parlor from where I was living. It was 60 miles away, and went there. They actually turned me away the first time. They didn't believe I was 18. I kind of looked like a cop, probably. And I still do kind of look like a cop, which is ironic. But it was just something. And then the pornography, I don't know. It was just like, the negotiation is a trip. I mean, you pull up, they kind of sense you. It's like drug addicts always talk about, they can tell who's selling the drugs and who's the addict. It's like the predator can tell who the prey is,
Yeah, that sixth sense.
They knew, I drove up, and I remember the first time I drove up, and like the girl walked towards my car and like indicated for me to pull around the corner, and she's walking up, and I'm just, my heart's beating 1,000 beats a minute, and I just drive off real quick, and just like, it was like a free rush, and then eventually I did it, and it was crazy. You're just like, wow. Why am I doing this? This is insane. And yet the high was unbelievable, and then, it's.
Well, I think it's crazy to me that you had that thought as a kid, and how those acts or thoughts, or, maybe we see something, can play into our adult lives. I can remember, sneaking magazines and as a kid, like, I don't know, Playboys or Hustlers or whatever, and not really knowing exactly what it was, but it was naked chicks, you know what I mean? And it was like, fucking, this is cool. Like, I don't know. I was a little dude, man. And, I think as men, or I'll speak for myself, like, sex can be an issue with many, many men out there. And a lot of us, at least for me, like, I'll write it off as like, oh, I'm just a dude. That's just how dudes are. We're fucking horny, and we like to fuck, and that's just the way it is, But at a certain point, with the pornography involved, when you start getting into those things, and then in your case, it actually leads to, prostitution and massage parlors and stuff, it can really fuck us up bad. How do you think the porn industry has really hurt our society too? I think that's had a huge effect on our society, on our youth. Growing up now, it's just so easily accessible. You can just jump online and get free porn on there. Like you said, back in the day, you had to go, you had to find the VHS from your uncle's closet or something, or you had to go show face in the sex shop and shit. That was like the novelty, deal, to go in and fucking have a hood on and shit, Yeah. I mean, what are your thoughts on that, man?
Well,
I know I threw like 10 different things at you.
No. I could talk about this for hours, but so I'll try to sum it up. But, I've been cognizant of this for a long time. When I wrote an article when I was in law school for an essay contest, called Miller versus the United States, and it was about pornography, and it's basically a Supreme Court case that defined obscenity. And what happened is that obscenity. There was pornographers that were always on the line of like, if I make something that's too hardcore, I could go to prison. You know what I'm saying? So it was like this thing. And so they defined pornography, and it had to do with prurient interest and all this stuff. And it was so vague that it really didn't mean much. Yeah. But, and so what happened was when Bush was in office, they were very hardcore on obscenity, and they prosecuted a lot. But then when Clinton came into office, he pretty much just completely got rid of that part of the Attorney General's office. It basically gutted it. Really? And so what happened was that happened almost at the exact same time that video cameras came around. So when home video cameras. Yeah. So when home video cameras came around and VHS tapes, and that the federal prosecution stopped, it exploded, right? And so like any other drug, tolerance happens. So the pornographers would react to the tolerance of people, and it would get more and more and more hardcore. Like if you look at 60s pornography, it's probably no more hardcore than stuff you can see on mainstream TV.
Yeah, it was like somewhat passionate back in the day. Right. It was like there was some, I don't know, it wasn't fucking nearly even close to as graphic as shit that is out now.
Right. And now it has a tonal quality to it that is, it's not just what you're seeing on the screen, it's the tone of it. And, I don't think it's good to, I don't think it's good to just like say that's bad and this is good. That's not going to help anybody. But but there's no question that it's going to affect people. I mean, the fact that most kids, teenagers and stuff, are seeing acts of hardcore sex many, many times on their computers long before they have sex themselves, of course it affects them. Yeah. It's their example of how sex happens. Yeah. I remember being in rehab, and some guy in there had a daughter, and he was telling me this story of like how the school had made some statement or something telling the parents to be careful because there was a new trend in the schools that because the girls didn't want to get pregnant, that they were having anal sex. And you're just like, I was just like, oh my God, you imagine that you have a teenage daughter and you hear that come across, you're like, lose your mind, Yeah, so
fucking shit.
It's definitely an addiction. I mean, there's definitely addictive qualities.
Where do you draw the line between like, I'm a dude that likes to have sex all the time, and my wife will fucking vouch for that, and a sex addict? Like, how do you, and that's kind of what I was getting at earlier, and maybe this is for my own personal selfish reasons I asked you this, but I'm sure there's some other folks out there who can relate to it. Like, where is the line in between that? And then our society, we've been so molded into like, I'm just a dude, I like to have sex. I like to look at chicks. I jerk off sometimes. Like, I mean, it's just fucking normal. So like, what is the line between like where it's too much and then, it's normal, I guess, in a sense.
Well, I imagine it's different for different people, but for someone who has an addictive character, I think it has to do with the same thing that it would be with drugs and alcohol. I mean, a normal person, when they drink, has a couple drinks and everything's cool. They're not thinking about it all the time. They certainly don't have shame. Yeah. And I think any sex addict would tell you that when they have acts of sex that are sex addiction, that there's shame almost immediately after. And, there's a different quality to it. I think that that sex with somebody you love, or, somebody you're in a relationship with, or even masturbation or something that is just part of human sexuality, has such a different quality. I mean, that's why I can talk about it so freely, and people kind of trip out a little bit on that, because it's so clinical to me. The sex addiction act is like shooting dope or taking a pill. It's no different. It's just a different delivery system. And it has really no connection whatsoever to sex in a loving relationship.
Yeah, man, it is. It is kind of trippy to talk about and to think about. And man, I really appreciate you being so open about it. and talking about it, because it's something that's not talked about. I mean, I've been looking forward to talking with you we've had this scheduled now for a while, and it's such an important issue. And I think there's a lot of guys out there like myself who just don't really understand like where that line is. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that doesn't, obviously it's not cases that are, as extreme as the lengths that you went through with being a full-blown sex addict. But I think that there's always those, there could always be those certain issues there in not really knowing like what is okay and what is not okay. Let's kind of jump back. Sorry, man, I kind of got us off track there a little bit, but good conversation. And I appreciate you kind of elaborating on that a bit. I want to get back into your story and take us through that progression of how the prostitution, the massage parlors, the alcohol, it continues to get worse. And then take us to the night that ultimately really changes everything for you.
Okay, well, let's flash forward. I went to Pepperdine Law. I graduated and passed the bar. I had a lot of depression. I drank some. I acted out some while I was there, but I kind of kept it together and I was a half-assed student, but I was good enough to graduate and pass the bar. And I moved out to near where my family was at the time, which was North County, San Diego. And, I as addicts tend to do, we just go gung-ho at whatever we're into. So I did that with law, and I had some success, and got a good job and had this place by the beach. And I just had a lot of access, and so I started representing bars. Like I did a lot of, I found it pretty, you could get, if you got bars as clients, it was really good because they had all kinds of legal issues. They were always in trouble. They had slip and falls, they had ABC issues, and they had all kinds of issues. And so I would go in there and I'd play the big shot and I'd drink at bars. And so I could, I'd hang with the bar owners, and a lot of the bartenders would, the owners / bartenders would be doing coke and just hanging out. And I just started, it just became, what it was is like got to the point where if I was honest with myself, my life was about chasing my addiction. Like there was nothing I would rather be doing than sitting at a bar stool and drinking and smoking, and then hopefully, meeting a woman and having sex. Yeah. And that was it. So all my work and stuff was really just towards that, like make money so I get to do that a lot, Yeah. It's a really sad way to live. And so, I kind of blew up in Oceanside and kind of didn't get along there. And so I did a geographic and I moved to Riverside and joined this really good law firm out there, back right where I grew up. And really good law firm, prestigious law firm, had been there for almost 100 years. Great lawyers were there, and I was going to start over, And when I first started, I did really well and billed a lot of hours, and everybody liked me, and the usual. But then it started going downhill. And then in Riverside, unlike Oceanside, there was a lot of prostitution and massage parlors around that were ones you could have sex at. The ones in Oceanside didn't for some reason, because I think it had something to do with the Marines. They had some thing where they wouldn't go past a certain point. Anyway, so I was in Riverside, and that's when I got my first DUI.
It's cool, man. I'm just getting a hand job. No big deal.
Yeah, hand job. That's weak sauce.
Sorry, man.
And so I got this DUI, and it was a really bad DUI. I rolled my car over at 85 miles per hour. There was a passenger that got injured, and I got beat up a little bit, and I got a felony DUI. I was being prosecuted for a felony DUI, and I was just humiliated, and I just decided that I needed to take care of this drinking problem. So what I did was I decided I needed to move somewhere where I didn't have to drive in order to go to a bar. So I got an even better job, and I moved to Santa Monica, and I lived in Santa Monica, and it was like I always say, I failed up. I made more money. It was a nicer place to live. It was, everything was great. And I did really well, and I kept it together for a few months, just like before when I was there. And then I was smoking, fucking, drinking so hard, because every night I would come home and I could just walk. There was massage parlors within walking distance. There was probably 6 or 7 bars within a half a mile of my house. Wow. But ironically, at the time, I kind of chilled out on the sex stuff because it was too risky, and so I just drank and smoked a lot. But what happened one night, I went out and I'm still, I just settled the DUI, and I got away with only having a misdemeanor DUI, and I was supposed to start AA meetings and drunk driving school like a couple days later. And that was a 2-year process of fighting that case and everything. And the last thing the lawyer said to me, and it was Naus, who was the guy who ran for a DA here in LA recently. And he says, Joseph, don't ever do anything like this again. And I was like, Naus, you got to be kidding me. You'll never see me again. Wow. And so one night I failed out of that law firm too, the one in Santa Monica. I just drinking and partying too much. I wasn't getting my billable hours in. So I started a law firm with my friend from law school. And again, I failed up. Everything was friggin' awesome. We were making even more money. I had all kinds of time on my hand. At first I was scared that we weren't going to get clients, but we got even more and more clients. And, things were just good. And then one night I came home and I was negotiating with myself. I was like, you need to go to bed. You need to go to bed because you got to get up early and go to this client meeting at a golf course. It's like really early in the morning. Don't go out. And I'm standing out there smoking cigarette after cigarette. And then you know how we do. We talk ourselves into this stuff, right? Yeah. And so I talked myself in. I'm like, okay, we'll just go out for one drink. So I go out for quote unquote one drink, and I black out. I drink, 6 or 7 Jack and Cokes and a bunch of beers or whatever. I black out. I walk back down the street. I go to an ATM machine. Unbeknownst to me, all this is in a blackout. I figure all this out from the police report afterwards. But I pull $100 out of the ATM machine, which is exactly how much you need to have sex in a massage parlor. I go to this massage parlor that's literally like a block and a half from my house, and I knock on the front door, and nobody answers, of course, because it's 2 or 3 in the morning and there's no one there. But I'm in some weird blackout thing, and I'm pounding, and it's like this kind of weird C-shaped motel thing where one corner of the motel is a massage parlor, and the rest of it is like old motel rooms that have been converted to single residence occupancy type thing. And, it's kind of weird Santa Monica area where it's like a lot of stuff is grandfathered in. So you'll have a $1 million house, 2 doors down from a massage parlor.
That's crazy
over there. And so I went around back and I climbed into the massage parlor window. And I took off all my clothes, and I went to walk in the massage parlor with just my wallet, I think, in my hand. And it turned out I went into the window that was right next to the massage parlor window, but it was adjoining, like flat surface, so all the windows were the same. And I went in there, and it was some guy's apartment. So this guy wakes up to the smell of alcohol and cigarettes and me. At the time I was like 220 pounds, 6'4", white guy with a heart on, with a wallet. And of course he loses his mind and freaks out. And we get into a fight, and, I try to subdue him. And, I don't really remember any of this other than just kind of I do have a little bit of memory of being in a room where there's lights that are spinning, kind of like a dream when you get those peripheral kind of red and yellow and blue flashes on the side of your head. Yeah. And I guess I put him in a chokehold, which was something I learned from my martial arts times, which was a carotid artery hold, which would, could kill somebody. So, but I let him go, and then he chased me. I went out the window. I came in, and he went out the other side and got a friend of his, and they went and chased me and beat the shit out of me in a lawn across the street, right next to a Der Wiener Schnitzel. And so I'm sitting there getting my head beat in by these guys. Guys hitting me with a skateboard. So this guy's hitting me with a skateboard, boom, boom, over and over and over. And at one point I think like, oh, he's going to kill me. Like I can't feel it because I'm so anesthetized from the alcohol that I can't feel it. But at some point I'm like, oh, he's going to kill me, because he hit me like 6 or 7 times over the head as hard as he could.
Yeah.
And so I get away and I run. I'm pulling up my pants and I'm running down the street, and I hide in some bushes, and the cops come and get me and arrest me.
Damn.
And then I wake up and I black out. I was in a blackout the whole time, and I wake up, like you said in the intro you gave. I woke up handcuffed to a hospital bed, not knowing what the hell was going on. I didn't know what was there, and then the doctor came in and stapled my head shut because the skateboard had slid open my scalp and put a bunch of staples in my scalp, and then that's where it started. Do you want me to continue?
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, God, it's just fucking insane, man, insane. So I mean, you nearly kill someone, you nearly get killed, and you don't recall most of it as you're describing that, like the spinning, the lights and stuff. Yeah, I just picture like you see in those movies when people are just fucked up out of their minds. They don't really know what is going on. It's almost like a nightmare. You wake up in the bed, and what are you thinking? Like, you're there for what? I mean, I probably got another DUI, or did I crash? Or obviously you don't really have any idea of the full severity of the, of what just happened the night before. What happens from there?
I knew that I knew that I had been in a massage parlor. I think it was because maybe when the cops told me or something, or I had some memory of that. Uh-huh. And so I called up my lawyer after they put me in, they put me in, gave me my one phone call. And she asked me what it was. And I thought it was probably solicitation of prostitution was what I was being charged with. I figured what happened was I went to the massage parlor and got in trouble there.
And you would kind of had that fear before too, right? That's what you were saying earlier, is that's kind of a reason that you stopped, is because you didn't want to get picked up and get caught for being out there, soliciting. So I guess that would make sense in that thought once you wake up.
Yeah. So I thought I was being charged with solicitation of prostitution, and my attorney finally shows up after a long time. And at that point I kind of had, I was having really, I had really drank. I probably came pretty close to dying. I drank so much, and from alcohol poisoning, and I was having just almost hallucinations and shit. And she comes, and I'm like, "What? Come on, what's up? Bail me out. I gotta go deal with the aftermath of not showing up to that meeting for work. Having no idea, thinking that was my problem. Yeah. Having no idea how severe this was." And she says, "I'm like, what am I being charged with?" And she says, attempted murder. Attempted murder. I'm like, whoa, attempted murder. And it turns out what happened was the cop, the guy that the sad victim, the unfortunate victim of my chaos and my insanity, was described with the hold that I had put him in. And that is a hold that cops use, or used to use before they killed a few people in county jail, but used to use. And so they were very familiar with that hold. And so that's why they charged me with attempted murder, because it was a deadly hold. Yeah. But then, as your listeners might recall from the intro, that things got worse. And you might ask, how could things get worse from being charged with attempted murder? Well, I ended up being charged with a whole bunch of sex crimes, because the theory of the DA was that I went into the room with the intent to commit rape. Which is horrifying, embarrassing, horrifying. And, that was just an absolute nightmare. And so for the next 2 years, I fought the case, and I've never not given up the whole story when I do a podcast or anything. So I'll go ahead and do it here. But, I ultimately pled guilty to a sex charge. I was looking at, if I would have been convicted on all the charges, I would have done 20 years. And I just wasn't willing to put even though I thought I had a real good chance of winning a trial, even the judge said, that he didn't think there was evidence to support the idea that I was there to commit rape. The judge doesn't get to say that to a jury. So they're looking at me, some privileged white boy, breaking into someone's house in the middle of the night with a hard on. That's not something I want to go in front of a jury with.
Yeah.
And so ultimately I pled guilty to that. So right now I'm a registered sex offender, and hopefully, if there's a law change, that might change one day, but now that's where I am. And had to do some time, but very little time in Chino prison. Went to Twin Towers and Chino prison for a little bit, but not 20 years.
Yeah. Well, and I did find some of that interesting in the book about, being in prison, and I think you're in protective custody, right?
Yeah.
When you went in. So there was a guy, Roman, I read, and Leonard. That's the
Yeah.
interesting part of the book. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what is that like going into prison? You never obviously been into prison. You've been on the other side of the law. And then now you have to go in there, and you also have to go in with this title that the story behind the title doesn't quite add up, or make sense to the actual title that you have to go in with these charges that are against you. How do you kind of deal and work through that, man?
Well, I took a two-tiered approach. One was I got as big and buff as I possibly could get before I went in. So I went in 220 pounds, ripped and big as I'd ever been in my life. And then the other tactic was to go in wearing glasses and to be an AA, big book thumping geek and lawyer. And my cover was that I was in protective custody because I had been a lawyer and I'd done some criminal defense work. And so that was my, take it to the grave, line. But my theory was, hopefully they won't mess with me because they'd rather pick on somebody that's smaller.
Yeah.
And then my other thing was, like, I didn't fuck around. Like, when I went in there, I didn't do commissary. I didn't talk to people. I was friendly but curt and short, and I stuck to myself, and I was just smart and safe when I was in there. And the 12 steps were really what saved my ass when I was in there. I prayed, I meditated, I read the big book probably 30 times, cover to cover, while I was in there. And it's weird in there that people would come up, people even would say to me, like, you don't belong here, So they kind of know if you're in there and you're playing the games that a lot of people are playing, that's when people get in danger. I'm not saying people aren't in danger when they're not, but that's when they are. And as far as the protective custody thing, which is sex offense, that's a real dangerous place to be, because there's two people in protective custody generally. There's sex offenders there's three people: sex offenders, snitches, and gang dropouts.
Yeah.
Now, gang dropouts, like your like Tad, right?
Yeah.
If he, God forbid, went back in, he would be in protective custody forever because he was a gang dropout.
Yeah.
Now that's dangerous because you got guys who are like hardcore and who aren't down with sex offenders in there with them, and so that could be really dangerous and scary, as I describe in the book. Because they want the thing is in there, they don't care if you're in there for masturbating in public. You're a child molester. If you're in there for any sex offense, they presume you're a child molester, and you're there. You're going to be killed.
Well, and man, that's got to be a hard thing. I mean, just the word sex offender. Obviously there's not a very positive review behind that word. How do you, obviously you're very open about it. You're very accepting of your path that you've been down and the things you've been through. How do you kind of deal with that, man? And how has that been, dealing with and moving forward in your life and trying to get back on the right track and trying to, give back and share your story in the hopes that hopefully it helps somebody else out there and they don't go down that way?
Well, straight pepper diet was the story of how I survived, how I went to get in this position, and how I survived after I got arrested, right? And this next book that I'm writing, which doesn't have a title yet, is really about the question you just asked. And, I really had to have like a second spiritual awakening around this, about like I said before, it is done unto you as you believe it to be true. I had to take responsibility for this. When I first got out of jail and I took a deep breath and looked around, I went, oh my God, I am a registered sex offender, 2-strike felon, I'm broke, and I can't practice law anymore. What the fuck? But I had to go from saying that as a victim to saying that as someone who says, I am responsible for that. I am responsible for everything that happens in my life. The way that happened that night was not foreseeable.
Yeah.
But that it would happen, that a shameful sex addiction coupled with blackout drinking, that something horrible would happen, is very predictable. So I am 100% responsible for what happened. And the fact that I'm a registered sex offender I'm responsible for that. I caused it. I did it. It's 100% me. Now, I wrote this book, Straight Pepper Diet, and that's kind of my answer to like what happened. It's funny because when I go to parties and stuff and meet new people, it's like all roads lead to hell. All roads lead to hell when you talk to me. It's like, what do you do for a living? Where'd you go to school? Pepperdine. Bam, bam, bam. Disbarred. Why disbarred? Boom. What do you do? Oh, I'm a writer. Oh, what's your book about? Straight Pepper Diet. Boom, boom, boom. Sex offender. It's like all roads lead to hell.
What is the initial when you say that? I'm curious, man. What's the initial reaction or the face? Like, what's the most often? Like, what does that look like?
Well, I don't come out and say, "Oh, I'm a sex offender," but a lot of people are just like, "Oh," because you might say you wrote a memoir. You're like, "Well, you're 45 years old. I don't know you. Why would you write a memoir? You're not a star." And I'm like, "Oh, well, read it. You'll find out." So people, people are taken aback. But the thing about people is like, I've been a registered sex offender now for 13 years. I have never, ever had a neighbor come up to me. I've never had anybody email me, say anything nasty or any horrible things. Yeah. I think of the 133 Amazon reviews that I have on Amazon, which is for those who don't do Amazon, that's a lot of reviews for a book.
It is.
I think I have one review on there that says something like somebody said, like, I don't trust Joseph. He probably did it. I'm like, that's not bad for 133.
Yeah.
My point is that the truth of who you are is you can't hide that. People will see that. And my truth is in that book. I'm not a rapist. I'm an addict. I'm an alcoholic. I was in a blackout that night. Nobody that knows me or has been around me would ever think that I was a rapist or that I did this. But it doesn't really matter because it was a horrible, horrible thing I did. Whether I'm a rapist or not, I still broke into someone's fucking house in the middle of the fucking night and could have killed them. I mean, when I had my DUI, I could have killed the passenger, myself, and 10 other people in a car. I am responsible for these things. So,
I really admire your self-responsibility and your willingness to step up and not only talk about your story, but also, set an example for those listening right now. I mean, shit, if Joseph can get his life back on track after going through what he has been through, pretty damn sure almost anybody can do it and can go through life facing these adversities and these, some really tough things in life. But when we stand up and actually, I love what you just said, like, I'm responsible for me, and that's it. Like, there's nothing more to it than that. And until we stop blaming, circumstances or other people or places or things, it really doesn't allow us to be the people that God really intended us to be in our lives, man. And I really admire you for that, man. And thank you for coming on today and sharing and being so open and honest about it.
No worries. Hey, I appreciate it. I'm honored to be on the show. And hey, I had a thought. I hope this is appropriate. But you were asking about how to give away the books, and I was thinking maybe have the first people to email you that know what the reference Straight Pepper Diet is from.
All right.
And if you want, I'll be happy to send you some more books. We got tons of them, and if there's more than that, people.
Yeah, I have. So you guys sent us 4 copies. So we have 4 copies right now, and we will. So let me get this straight. So whoever emails me, the first 4 people that email me with the reference to the straight pepper diet, what it means, then we'll send you out the book. Is that right?
Yeah.
All right.
You like that?
I love it, man. That sounds
All right.
perfect. Yeah, man. Well, let me ask you one more question, and then I think we'll wrap this up, man. It's been great talking to you today. One thing that I thought was interesting about this, like alcohol, like drugs, once we get clean, once we get sober, we can't go back to that because all roads lead back to the same thing, and in a lot of cases, sometimes worse. With sex, I feel like that's a bit different. And if this is a little bit too personal for you, man, I totally understand. And we don't have to go there. But you're in a relationship today. You've built a new life for yourself. How do you deal with sex in a healthy relationship in being recovery from being addicted to sex? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I guess really it just, like I said, it doesn't really have the same tone to it. Like I just don't have any connection to that. I guess if I had to draw an analogy other than what I said earlier, would be like to food, like there's addictive eating and then there's eating for nutrition and health. And while you do have to be cognizant of what you eat, like having sex with a loved one in a committed relationship, at least that's what I do, doesn't have the tonal qualities or the addictive qualities that having sex outside of that and for prostitution or pornography or anything like that, like it doesn't have. It's completely dissimilar to me. It's not like I guess food would be the best way. Maybe like if you're a food addict, I've never been in that program, but eating eating something that you like. That's maybe eating fruit. You love fruit and everything, but it's different than eating, grubbing out on an entire chocolate cake and feeling horrible. It's like something like that. I don't know. It's hard to describe.
Yeah. But, No, I appreciate you, throwing it out there, and it is. It's. I think it's probably not hard to, or not only hard to describe, but hard to understand. I think too, and I think it's a good topic though. In any case. And
I would add to those, like, so maybe you have some listeners out there who do pornography. Like, no, I doubt it, right? Very unlikely, but let's just say.
Yeah.
But like, just say, like, try going a couple weeks without it, and see if it affects you. It's kind of like what they say in the book says in Alcoholics Anonymous. If you're not sure you're a real alcoholic, try going a while without drinking and see how it affects you.
Yeah.
Because you got to know, right? You got to figure it out, or you can't have a good step one.
Yeah. Well, yeah, man. I'm gonna step out of the box right now, and be honest with you and everyone listening to myself. I've had issues with pornography myself, and I think that's where that whole thing comes in that I was kind of asking you earlier about, like, well, how do I know if it's a problem? Is it just something, it's so normalized now? And I will say that it's been over a month since I've looked at any pornography, and it really has had a positive effect on me. And I've been able to see it and actually, I kind of feel like a weight a little bit lifted off of there, and I know dudes look at porn. I'm not saying that, that if you look at porn, you look at porn. I guess it's everyone's, own individual choice and whatever. But, I'm encouraged by your kind of challenge there, in my own right. And then I would second that to anyone out there listening. If you think it's an issue, you feel like it's an issue, maybe it's affecting your marriage or a relationship or whatever, try it out. Give it a few days without tugging the old snake on there and see how that works out for you. I mean, you never know. Yeah. So the book is a straight pepper diet. We'll put a link inside of the show notes here. And Joseph, for anyone out there who wants to reach out to you, wants to get more information, where could they do that?
You can email me at straightpepperdietmemoir.com has my contact on there. You can email me there, or I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Joseph W. Naus. And yeah, that's it.
Cool, man. I just realized
Please reach out.
I just realized I slaughtered your name, huh? I said Naus, Joseph Naus.
Well, it's funny because my family always pronounced it Naus, but then when I took German in college, I was rebellious and started pronouncing it right, which is Naus. So if my family listened to this, they're going to be pissed off. But that's all right. So you got it right. I'm just the only one who gets it wrong.
Okay, cool. I don't feel so bad. Well, hey, man, thanks so much for coming on today, man, being so open, sharing your story. It's absolutely amazing, and I really appreciate it, man.
All right. Peace and blessings to you and all your